The question was that the growth of the cabinet system, this is 2024 question, the growth of the cabinet system has practically resulted in marginalization of the idea of parliamentary supremacy. So it has resulted in marginalizing the idea of parliamentary supremacy. Even before I go into what all will go into the introduction, conclusion, etc., and that's not what the agenda is at this point of time, I'm saying that the arguments that you make in your answers have to be specific. They have to be backed by data. They have to be backed by some judgments of the court. They have to be backed by some expert or some scholar view. What I mean by that is, when I'll be talking about this, one of the points that I would be writing is that as a result of the growth of the cabinet system, we have seen an increased emphasis on ordinance route for making the laws in India. Now this is in itself is a very good point that I am making in order to justify that how parliamentary supremacy is declining, because several important legislations increasingly are being approved by the parliament or approved by the government via the ordinance route. The recent example of the Supreme Court's judges and the increase in the strength of the judges is something that we can quote here. Now, the point is that this needs to be substantiated with something. Either this needs to be substantiated with some current event. So, for example, as I said, I may talk about the recent ordinance which has been promulgated by the President with respect to increasing the strength of the judges of the Supreme Court of India. Of course, we need an increase in the strength of the judges of the Supreme Court. But should this process not be done through Parliament? Should such an important law, which is deciding the strength of the Supreme Court, should this law not be passed through the parliamentary route rather than the ordinance route? This could be one of the examples that we could be giving. Or this has to be backed by some kind of statistic. So the statistic could be that in the last so many years, the number of ordinances that are being passed by the government per year have seen an increase. So I remember that whenever we are discussing about the topic of ordinance in our foundation batch classes, I do mention this particular statistics to the students, that there has been a significant increase in the number of ordinances which are being issued by the government on an annual basis in India now. So this number has increased progressively from the 1960s to the present day, which shows that how the marginalization of the parliamentary role in lawmaking is taking place as a result of the ordinance route being taken up by the government. This could also be backed by some expert view. Possibly I read an article which was written by Pratap Bhanu Mehta, or an article which had been written by PDT Achari in the Indian Express or in the Hindu, or maybe a former judge of the Supreme Court, or maybe the founder of the PRS legislative, Chakshu Roy or Madhav. Any of these people have written some article. I could probably quoting their view as well in order to substantiate the point here. In GS paper 2, or for that matter in general studies, in all the papers, especially in 1, 2 and 3, your emphasis should be on writing the answers as much as possible in points, not in paragraphs. That is also one thing that we will be discussing about. But why that is also required is again to bring specificity to your answer. So when I am writing any particular argument, if I am writing 6 points, let's say that yes, the cabinet the increasing role of the cabinet has led to the declining role of the parliament, or has led to the idea of diminishing the idea of parliamentary supremacy. If I write 6 points, at least in 2 or 3, I need to substantiate that with the help of some of these things. It could be substantiated with the help of a judgment of the Supreme Court as well, or a judgment of the High Court as well, something that I may have read in the newspapers, but it has to be substantiated with the help of something. Okay, so this is one of the things that we have to keep in mind. Similarly, let's say when I'm talking about the declining role of the parliament as far as the functioning of the government or the overall functioning of the state is concerned, and the increasing role of the cabinet is concerned, in that case as well, I may mention about other things also. For example, I may talk about that how the government is increasingly relying upon the money bill method for approval of laws within the parliament. Again, I could be relating it to a current event. I could, and that current does not necessarily mean something which has happened just in last 6 months or 1 year. Current could be last 5 years as well. Current could be last 10 years as well. Something which is contemporary. And what that means is that I can even be quoting the example here of a law such as the Aadhaar Act, which was passed by the Parliament by bypassing the Rajya Sabha. And the Aadhaar Act could be passed by the Parliament simply because the government had majority in the Lok Sabha and this bill was introduced as a money bill. So the growth of the cabinet system has resulted in marginalization of parliamentary supremacy is another example that I can be giving here. I could also be talking about that how there has been an increase in the whips which are issued by the political parties to their members, and as a result of that there is less scope for dissent that exists in the parliament. I could be adding some argument about that how there has been a genuine decline, and it's not only the declining role of the parliament in functioning of the state in India cannot be attributed only to the cabinet's evolution or the increasing role of the cabinet, but it is to be blamed on certain other factors as well. And in that I could be talking about, so other factors, let's say if I'm talking about, I would mention about that there has been a decline in number of hours or days for which the Parliament of India functions on a yearly basis. And then I have to substantiate this with the help of some kind of a statistic. So specificity in your answers is very much required if you have to do well in GS paper 2. And this applies to GS paper 3 as well, because these two papers are slightly more technical as compared to GS paper 1, where you have questions of history and society, which can be easily tackled by writing generic arguments as well. But GS paper 2 and GS 3, you definitely need to have certain data, you need to have some numbers, you need to have some judgments, you need to have some ready-made material which you can be pushing in these particular answers. So that is one thing which UPSC is rewarding specifically.